we now continue with hearing from our next unicorn representative. Now from Singapore, Mr. Aaron Tan. Aaron is the CEO and founder of Carro Singapore. Hi, Aaron. Thanks for joining us. Welcome. Over to you.
Thanks, Jenny. Hi, everybody. I guess good morning for most of you, or good afternoon. I actually do not know. I'm actually right now in DC, and happy to speak to all of you from here in my hotel right now. Anyhow, so my name is Aaron, founder and CEO of Carro, Southeast Asia's largest wholesale marketplace for cars, right? So, when we think about life ourselves, we like to think about ourselves really as Alibaba.com for cars, right? So, or for that matter, Amazon.com for cars. And when we say that, what we really meant as a company really is to provide customers, be it in Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, or Singapore, and any of the markets that we are in today, the best experience when they want to buy and sell vehicles across the various regions, right? So on a high level, the company itself, we transact north of about 15,000 units of vehicles a month. We are by far the largest player in the market. And I guess more importantly, we continue to create a lot of jobs, and for that matter, create a lot of opportunities for various people and individuals across the various regions, right? So the company itself has about north of 2,000 plus people now across these 4 markets generically. At the same time, we have been expanding aggressively. And I think of late, we just recently raised a fairly sizable round from various sovereign funds, as well as SoftBank Vision Fund, right, which led the round itself back in June this year. Anyhow, so what I'm going to do over the next few minutes itself is to share a little bit about the topic of the discussion today, which is what were the challenges that we felt or we faced across as a company during the pandemic itself. But I wanted to keep this conversation, somewhat interactive. So if you guys have any questions, please just type it in. I'm looking at the chat right now as we speak. Happy to answer any questions that you guys may have, because at the end of the day, I believe that a more interactive session for that matter is more interesting than hearing me speak one-sided, so to speak. But again, let me just take a step back, right? So from a company standpoint, what happened was that in COVID itself, that was back April 2020 itself. It was a big shock for us, right? In Carro, and what happened really was that revenues declined. I want to say 80-90% month on month back in April, May, right? And that really was a shock, right? And why was it that bad? It was mainly because of the fact that during COVID itself, and as you guys might have remember, during those days, we were all stuck at home. Nobody was allowed to go out. The work from home protocol, for that matter, was still very, very new, and most people still do not really know what the hell was going on. So it was extremely, extremely tough for us to actually make things work, right? So as a result, you start realizing that revenues drop like really quickly, right? In so much so that in the month of month itself, for us at least, it declined 80-90%. And you realize very quickly that things are not doing as well as it should be, and we were basically trying to figure out what were we doing wrongly and trying to get it fixed in real time as we speak, right? So at a point in time, it was really, really tough for us, right? Especially during the period of time whereby when COVID just started. But very quickly, what happened was that in May itself, we actually found out that hey, we could actually productize a lot of our products at home. For that matter, we could reorganize the team very quickly, and actually quickly produce products that, or for that matter, quickly manage and run the company from the comforts of our home, right? So we started embracing, of course, all the technologies that you see today, right? Everything from Zoom to Meet and stuff like that. In the past, we had meetings in person. These days, we never had that, right? Anyway, so long and short of this is that revenues then quickly climbed. I think back 2-3 months later, when the market starts opening up, I think it went back to normal. In fact, we did way better than we did back in April, post June, July, right? Because there was so much pent up demand in the market by itself. But I think overall, I would say that the pandemic was really challenging at the start, mainly because of the fact that it was very sudden and nobody really expected to be working from home and stuff like that. And I think one thing we learned from the pandemic really was the shift of consumers by itself, right? Whereby, people are not able to get out. How do we want to get services delivered to them, right? Or for that matter, how do we sell cars and deliver that to their doorstep, so to speak? But at the end of the day, we had to adapt to that. We actually, provided services where it's like completely touchless service for you to, buy and sell cars online as well, right? And that actually allows us to move a lot faster moving forward than where we were to be earlier on back in April, right? So on a high level, the long and short of this is that the pandemic itself was extremely tough on the company back in April, right? And that is from the business standpoint, right? From the business standpoint, that was what it was. Now, from a manpower standpoint, the way we look at life is that it actually affects us quite a bit as well, right? So when we talk again, maybe I'll talk about manpower later, right? But from a travel standpoint, that's another thing that affected us quite a bit, right? Because we're not just in Singapore, we're not just in Indonesia, we're not just in Thailand, so to speak. And one of the biggest problems we had faced when it was a pandemic last year was travel as well, right? So travel itself was a big headache for us. How are we going to manage our team, right? And we have 2,000 people across all these markets. How do we manage each of them from Singapore remotely? And that was actually extremely difficult by itself. I mean, the good thing was that all the country heads in the respective countries stepped up. They actually moved and ran the team accordingly. And it was extremely tough by itself, right? And today, I think with travels being eased up a little bit, we hope that is a problem of the past, right? But given the new Omicron variant and stuff like that, and currently in DC right now, they're all talking about the fact that there's very little information that we have about the variant of the virus today, and as a result, nobody really knows what's going to go on, right? And as you might know, in the US right this second, they have basically restricted entering unless you have a COVID test like within 24 hours or something like that. Anyway, long and short of this is that travel has been extremely tough, and it makes it super hard for us to manage and run a team, especially if you run a very remote team, so to speak. The last thing I would say also is manpower, right? One thing we learned during COVID, and that was actually my biggest takeaway from all this COVID stuff, was that it is actually extremely hard to build culture, right? When people are away, right? When you don't see people, when the employees are not onboarded well properly on the day zero by itself, that's an issue, right? How they have never met any of their colleagues before, that is an issue, right? It is impossible to enforce culture, to bring new people in, to actually replace people and stuff like that, especially during the whole pandemic situation, right? And it is actually very, very tough in that sense on a company like us, whereby certain parts of the business itself cannot be entirely online. For instance, inspection, for instance, like repairing of vehicles and stuff and whatnot. Certain parts, yes, we could actually put it all entirely online, or back at, people can work from home and stuff like that. But some parts just needs that human touch to it. But I think what I'm trying to say really at the end of the day, from a manpower standpoint, the question we have to ask ourselves is that it is all said and done, all these are real challenges and stuff, right? But the question that we are facing right now, or rather in Carro, we're asking ourselves today really is, how should we look at the future of work, right? Given all this pandemic all these things that the pandemic has brought us. Today, if you ask someone to say that, hey, let's spend most of your time back in office, they're gonna look at you and like, oh, are you crazy, right? Because they are so used to working from home now, right? So much so that they claim to be way more productive working from home than they are working in office. So that's one big issue by itself, right? Does that mean that in future, moving forward, let's not even have offices? I do not know, right? So in fact, that's something that we discuss every day within the group itself, right? How should we think about enforcing culture, or for that matter, building culture within the team, given the fact that, hey, people don't work in offices anymore. And moving forward, even if you want them to come back to work, people may not even want to come back to work. That is increasingly your value proposition, so to speak, or for that matter, that's what they expect as they're looking for work. And to make matters worse, how do you deal with hiring? Because of all these COVID restrictions, bringing talent into the country itself is extremely tough, right? So for us as a company itself, it was a really, really tough couple of years, given the fact that it was hard to find new better people to bring into the country because of all these restrictions. And then to make matters worse, some people, some of our team may be poached or whatever not, and it is very hard to train and retrain and stuff, right? So if you look at it holistically, then the question is, how do you deal with all these things in the new post-pandemic world, or rather, in Singapore at least, we don't like to call it pandemic anymore. It's endemic, right? So we're treating it like flu, so to speak. Now, in this post-COVID world, how should we think about work? right? Is actually the key thing that we're asking ourselves these days, right? You know, the way I like to think about things is that it's sometimes a double-edged sword, right? So it can work against us, and hopefully it can work for us as well, right? And in our case, we really love we actually are thinking about this currently day in day out. How do we actually deal with all these issues and challenges that COVID has brought us? You know, the post-pandemic world, especially in regards to manpower side of stuff. Now that business is more or less settled, now that travel is more or less okay, right? Then the question for us is that what is the long-term implications for manpower across this post-pandemic era, right? So with that, anyway, let's see. I think I have some questions and stuff like that. Maybe I'll just answer a few questions here and there. If you guys have any other questions, please let me know, right? So the first question I had is, we started with being anti-dealer. Carro has since changed his relationship with dealers to how did you turn that around? I mean, look, I think publicly I've been quite honest about this, which is I think when we first started the business, we went out saying that, hey, you know what, we think that the dealers are not trustworthy, you know, you should not buy cars from them, yada yada and stuff like that. I think that has came back to bite us in the sense that the dealers basically were up in arms. They were basically saying, oh, you know, you should not work with Carro, etc., etc. That has not been good for us, especially as a startup coming in early on. So I think something that we learned since day zero is that we should focus on partnerships, partnering with the ecosystem rather than to be against that. How do we turn that around? Very simplistically, we basically stopped doing it, right? So in the past, we were actively pushing ads, actively telling people and stuff like that. I mean, until such time when I instructed the team, the marketing team, stop doing that because this ruins our relationships down the stream and stuff like that. And at the same time, we actually actively engage the dealers to tell them and say that, hey guys, we come in peace, right? I think those are the two things that we actually did. So number one, really actively engage the dealers, tell them that you come in peace. Number two, don't, I guess the word is reputation smear the dealers in that sense, right? So I think that's the first part. Following your story at FI. So yes, I was in FI, I think yesterday or the day before, but my question is, which role do you find most interesting being a VC or startup founder and why? Yes, so I was a former VC since like 10 years ago now, 11 years now, and a startup founder. I would say that it depends on which age you're in. You know, as a younger guy, I would personally feel that it is better to be a founder itself, because this way you have more energy to deal with things. As you're older, you know, you probably want to take a step back and then do more investing, whereby you can share your knowledge and stuff like that. But for myself, if the question is which is more challenging, definitely hands down being a founder, no questions on that. The VCs, I mean, being a former VC myself, I can say that they have a very easy life. All they do really is they fundraise, and then you just sit down and deploy, right? $1 here, $10 there, $20 million there, 10 million here, and stuff like that. They have a far easier, far more cushy life than any of us here. So anyway, more challenging, definitely startup, right? Than VC. Okay, last question. Love to know how you got into entrepreneurship, and two, apart from cars, what drives you? I started my first company when I was 13. By the time I was 13, you know, I think what really drove me was the curiosity of building companies, right? Or rather building search engines. The first company that I built was a search engine company by itself, right? So I was trying to figure out how exactly do I build that. So I went to the local library, and I basically looked through a whole ton of books. And I subsequently agreed that, you know what, I should learn how to just build the search engine myself. And that basically was how I got into, you know, building softwares, and subsequent to which building companies and stuff, right? But really what drives me apart from cars itself really is this constant curiosity of how things works, constant need to find out, right? In that sense is really what drives me. I mean, basically curiosity drives me the most, right? In that sense versus anything else. But yeah, so anyway, I think it's about time, 15 minutes. I'm not even sure. I haven't even timed myself, but I suppose I've been talking for at least 15 minutes now. If there's any other questions that I can take in future, just drop me an email, aaron@carro.co.sg, whatever you want. But otherwise, thanks so much for having me today. You know, I look forward to speaking to more of you.